The Jersey Swap podcast is sponsored by Apollo Home. Folks, your orange and blue are back this weekend, and so are the wild swings in temperature. Perhaps you should turn your attention to your heater and HVAC before the really cold weather arrives. Don't wait for your heater to give out on you without a check on it. Give Apollo Home a call, send them a text, or schedule online at apollohome.com. Hey guys, welcome back to the Jersey Swap podcast, where we focus on the opposition long enough to get an idea how to infiltrate the defenses. If that really was the function of this podcast, it has not been working lately. Cincinnati have lost their last three home matches 1-0. So maybe we're losing our touch a little bit. I don't know. Tomorrow always brings new opportunities, and Saturday's matchup against Nashville SC might be Cincinnati's best chance to stop the negative trend. The last time these two teams met, the Orange and Blue went down to Nashville and escaped to the Music City with a late 2-1 victory. To talk to us about the still unnamed rivalry, as much as fans will push it under the rug, we have Wes Boling from Club and Country to join us tonight. Let's bring him on. Thank you for joining us, Wes.
It's great to talk to you. Should we just call it the Big Bird Derby? I feel like the most heated days of this rivalry were in those like USL days still, at least for now. Two teams kind of in the top four. Maybe the more heated days are to come, but I don't know. Maybe it's all about Tucker Hume still.
I was about to say, like, that's one of the names that sort of faded into oblivion, during the USL years. It feels like both of our teams have built up so much potential coming out into MLS. And while, your team certainly did have more glory days coming out the gate, ours needed a few years to get it to happen. It feels like this rivalry should definitely, I think, get some impact now that both teams are looking towards the playoffs.
I hope so. You've got two managers now who know each other so well. I think we should both agree on a couple things. Number one, somebody's got to turn things around in this game. Nashville losers of 4 of 5, Cincy 3 of 4. And I think we should also agree that every club in MLS should just start exporting leaders from Philadelphia. Seems to work pretty well. I think, when you start struggling, just do that. And it seems to be the key to turning things around.
That's right. BJ Callaghan, the new coach for Nashville, even though we probably shouldn't call him new, he's had an entire season to put things in place, and he's really turned around this team. Then again, you also look at Philadelphia in general without Jim Curtin, and they've turned things around. So a lot of, I think, familiar faces coming back up to the top of the East. We'll definitely cover a little bit about Callaghan. I want to talk a little bit about you, how things are doing down there in the Music City.
Things are good. Things are really good. I mean, except for on the pitch here in the last five games or so for Nashville SC, a loss to Atlanta and an international break for fans to stew on it a little bit. It's been a little bit frustrating, but it's always an interesting time of year in Nashville, Tennessee, not unlike Ohio, in that once football season hits, the diehards stick around and they're still fired up. And yeah, you lose the edge that you had in summer when you were really the only show in town, with apologies to the Nashville Sounds and the Cincinnati Reds. So it's kind of an interesting, weird time of year where in some cases the excitement is ramping up toward the postseason and toward a Nashville team that's going to be involved in the postseason and can clinch a spot as soon as Saturday. On the other hand, you're trying to fend off the sideshow that is Tennessee, Georgia. A lot of fans are looking for good reasons to ignore the Titans. So maybe this is a good reason to do that.
Is that this weekend, Tennessee, Georgia, or is that coming down
this weekend? It's all I've been thinking about. Besides Nashville SC, of course, and getting ready for this one against Cincy. It's and maybe my day job a little bit.
You're talking to a Georgia Tech grad, so anytime University of Georgia comes up, it's kind of like a touchy-feely subject.
We're on the same team then this weekend, at least in one respect.
At least in one respect. So let's talk a little bit about really how Nashville SC has been doing this season. It feels like 2025 has come in waves, or at least stages for Nashville. Yeah. I mean, a decent 4 wins, four wins, 4 losses, and 1 draw in the first 9 matches. A win against Philadelphia. In fact, you guys have won both the home and away legs against Philadelphia this season. You follow it up with a 13-match unbeaten streak. Sweep against Chicago, that impressive 7-2 win at home against the Fire. But as you mentioned, they've sort of fallen back to earth. 3 wins over their last 8 MLS matches. I know it's a little hard to put a grade on it, but looking at BJ Callaghan's work, what kind of grade can you give him in his first season?
I think the best grade that we could assign is not your traditional A to F scale. It's to judge how far Nashville is along the trajectory of getting to what they've called Nashville SC 2.0. And that's a line that Mike Jacobs, the general manager, has used, ownership has used, and BJ Callaghan has used. I think where is Nashville along that measuring stick? And I think early on you saw a team, as you said, a little bit sluggish out of the gates, not playing bad soccer, but still feeling its way out as we expected. And all of a sudden they don't lose from late April until mid-July. And that includes getting to the U.S. Open Cup semifinals, which they play here next week on Tuesday against Philadelphia. As you've mentioned, some noteworthy wins. They're not just cleaning up against scrubs and even the losses. I mean, I think back to the loss against Cincinnati at home, and Cincy deserved to win that game, but Nashville played good soccer. It was appealing. And so I think my grade is actually, where is Nashville along that 1.0 to 2.0 scale? And I think it's probably more like a 1.6 or a 1.7. I think they're really starting to realize the identity toward which they aspire. And you and I both know, as much parity as there is in Major League Soccer, turning around a complete change in manager, complete change in tactics, it takes more than one or two personnel cycles. And so I think, considering the talent they have at their disposal and the relatively slow activity in the transfer window, I think they're at a really good place compared to where we thought they might be. The problem is, I think we were all thinking they'd arrived at 2.0 here earlier, after
Yeah.
that stretch. And now over the last month and a half, you've seen sluggish efforts, at home against Atlanta. That's when you just can't lose against this Atlanta team. On the road against St. Louis City, was filling in actually on play-by-play for Nashville in that one. And of course, they gave me a dud. I was quite disappointed with that. Losing at San Diego, losing at NYCFC, you just chalk those up to that's Major League Soccer and it's a tough league. I don't think I don't think that this is a sign that Nashville has necessarily lost its touch, but I do think it calibrated expectations yet again. That this team hadn't met that 2.0 space yet, but you know what? Nobody ever really expected them to be this year. So I give BJ Callaghan a high mark for getting Nashville pretty quickly, pretty far along that road to what they want to be.
That's exactly where I would say FC Cincinnati was in their first year under Noonan in 2022.
Right.
They weren't going to win all of their games. They weren't expected to. And they knew that there would be some losing streaks, some winless streaks going on down there. But they're definitely not going backwards. I'm impressed by Nashville in terms of they were able to, withstand, I think, arguably their best defender not being 100% Walker Zimmerman, but also finally finding that number 9 up top. We can definitely go right straight into Surge right now. I mean, I'm looking at some of the names from the past: Daniel Rios, Akeloba, even right now, CJ Sapong and Teal Bunbury. I mean, what particular characteristics have set him apart from these past number 9s?
He kind of brings the best qualities of a lot of those players. We talked about Akeloba as somebody, first of all, who absolutely was a disappointment in Nashville, but who brought some versatility. He could play on a wing if he needed to, as Sam Surridge has done at times. He could participate in build-up, as Surridge is willing to do. He's still top 10 in Major League Soccer in both fouls committed and fouls drawn. So he's very active in possession versus being that island up top. So he's like Loba in that he likes to get involved in the build-up. He has a good finishing touch like Daniel Rios, who I still think Nashville should have kept around, or at least tried to sell directly to Mexico versus going through Charlotte, but they had a surplus of players. CJ Sapong was an ace alongside Hani Mukhtar in the counterattack. And that's something that, Surge has done. We've seen some like old school throwback Gary Smith moments this year as well, of Nashville setting traps in the mid block and countering. So I think the reason that Surge has been so successful is he doesn't have just one style of play or one way to go about scoring his goals. And the other reason is, 20 goals is great. He's in Golden Boot position right now, but it's a product as much of the buildup behind him as it is his own individual excellence. He's part of the buildup, but he's also a beneficiary of it. And, the reason that he and Hani Mukhtar have combined for 34 goals this year is that, look, there's not a third scorer that's done anything much. I mean, Ahmed Qasim's third with 2 goals, but, you look at Andy Nahar with 7 assists. You look at high fullbacks creating overloads, stretching the field, pressuring opponents, forcing turnovers. And Surridge, look, give the man all the credit in the world for being a very versatile and dynamic player, but he's also benefited from an attack that's a lot more dynamic in its own right.
And I credit could probably go to BJ Callaghan for that. Outside of really that play, is there anything that he's done in particular that sort of set Surridge off, or is it mostly the players that he's installed around him?
Yeah, I think, when you looked at what Gary Smith did in Nashville, and I went down with the Gary Smith ship a little bit. Like, I understand now that Nashville needed to evolve, and I guess I got it then. But I think what happened with Gary was you got locked in on one or two attackers, and that was it. And I think what BJ Callaghan has done so well is to set up such a total football system where, BJ sets not just Surge and Mukhtar up for success, but the whole attack by, as I mentioned, getting the fullbacks high, especially on the right side, by having sixes who can look like eights, who can look like tens, and sometimes tens who can look like sixes. And so when you have players who can, spread the love in the attack, then defenders can't just camp out in the pockets of guys like Surridge or Mukhtar, right? They've got to keep other guys honest too, and they're kept honest. And I think maybe that's it. Maybe the biggest thing that BJ Callaghan has done, honestly, is help Andy Nahar stay healthy and get involved on the right flank, because that unlocks everything else. That scrambles the defensive equation completely. When all of a sudden, then you've got a center back who has to come out and respect Nahar and help his fullback. Then you got Hani Mukhtar or Sam Surridge, or sometimes both, free in the box. So I think the best thing that he's done is to not be afraid to get forward, to get beyond that Gary Smith mentality a little bit, and to take some chances, knowing you might get exposed in defense. But in reality, actually, Nashville's best defense has also been its attack.
Yeah. You look back at Gary Smith, and he had games where it was very much depending and leaning on the defense. But this year, you still look at that 12-match streak, the undefeated streak, and by my math, you're looking at 4 clean sheets, 1 goal allowed per game. How has this defense been restructured, even though the likes of Walker Zimmerman has not been at 100%?
Yeah, I think part of it is that this is not the deepest team in Major League Soccer, but in terms of functional depth, they've got 17 or 18 guys who they'd be perfectly happy plugging in and starting. And they have surpluses at nearly every position. The one very notable exception being left back, where they've had a couple of injuries. Dan Levitt's working his way back in. But I think, when you sign a guy like Jason Palacios, I was told by people close to the club when he was brought in, this guy's coming in from Colombia, and he's a name you don't know, but he was brought in to compete, to be a starter, not just to be a depth piece. Mm-hmm. So they had 3 starters there, Jack Mayer, Jason Palacios, and of course, Walker Zimmerman in central defense. Nahar getting forward up the right flank is countered by the fact that you have a Gaston Brugman, you have an Eddie Tagseth, especially, who's a freaking mosquito on the pitch. He's all over the place, who can step back and who can, compensate for that aggression. And so part of it is that, Nashville doesn't have the Jose Antonio Martinez in midfield, to go back to Philadelphia, who's going to get as many yellow cards as he has goals, but it doesn't matter because he's going to be the enforcer. They don't have that enforcer, but they have a cast of characters, who are regularly rotated, who are generally fresh. And then, as I mentioned, I think that attack is its best defense in some cases, where they're fine with losing the ball in the final third, because they're going to repress and they're going to keep you from getting your rhythm. And occasionally they're going to give up a lung-busting counterattack goal. And they've kind of made that trait, and they're okay with that, because they have enough solidity back there, and they believe they have enough goal-scoring prowess that they can compensate.
Yeah, the names that they brought in, Brugman, I believe from the Galaxy, if I recall correctly. Yep. You have Tagseth, Patrick Yazbek, who was brought in last season. These are 3 pretty solid names. Like you said, 6 through 10 they could be. And then, granted, they did cut some of the chaff off. Thank you very much, Brian Anunga. He's been playing really well for us, but
we love Brian. Yeah.
He's definitely more of just your number 6. And so seeing this versatility in the midfield does seem like it alleviates a lot of pressure off of the defense.
Yeah, when Nashville said goodbye to Dax McCarty after the 2023 season, there was that huge question of who's going to be the next Dax McCarty. They waved goodbye to Anibal Godoy this offseason. Who's going to be the next Anibal Godoy? And the answer is that's not how it's going to work. The answer is that you're doing a new thing entirely. And
right.
It is to Mike Jacobs' credit that he's brought in 3 guys again to play essentially in 2 slots. As you mentioned, Tagseth, Yazbek, and Brugman. And, I work in the tire business, and we have tires that are meant for mileage and tires that are meant for moments. People want 80,000 miles out of every tire, but the fact of the matter is sometimes a high performing tire with a soft compound is not going to last you very long, but boy, is it going to give you some thrills. Yazbek and Tagseth are built for mileage. They can be your season long guys fighting for time in there. Gaston Brugman is built for moments. He's not going to start 34 games for you, nor do you expect him to, but the man can still pick out a pass. And that's why he was MLS Cup MVP with LA Galaxy this past year. And so, they've got there, again, some adaptability of how they want to play, where they can put in Brugman against a DC United, or a Toronto, or a team that you're going to have to break down and they're going to sit back. But then, a Tagseth or a Yazbek are really good box-to-box types who aren't going to pour in a lot of goals. But, BJ Allen told me in a production meeting before that St. Louis match, he said, I'm kind of mad that Yazbek hadn't had the chance to get on the score sheet more. Mad for his sake, because he does everything else. And so I think those guys have really been a good mix of blue collar, but also kind of flashy sometimes in the way they go about their business. And it's been a really good combination, again, of that functional depth, those three guys playing for those two spots.
As someone who early on in my own career worked for a rubber company, I can really appreciate this analogy that you have with performance tires and long-lasting tires. So when the rubber hits the road, that's what you want, right?
Hey, pun intended, right?
Yeah.
Hey, careful, I'll talk tires all night. I'm with Ohio people, tire capital of the world. You can debate whether it's in Tennessee or in Ohio these days, but two great rubber places.
But I mean, you also have to realize that, sometimes the tread comes off that tire. And let's look at these last 8 games. It started with, I believe, a loss against Miami, a rough one. And there have been some rough losses, but there's also been that 5-1 victory over Orlando. But also this seems to be coinciding with, I think, the closing of the transfer window. And from what I see, I didn't see any real movement within Nashville. I mean, was this sort of the team saying they were content staying pat and they didn't have any really inefficiencies to fill?
Yeah, I think it's 3 things. Number 1, like you said, don't screw this up. things are going pretty well still, and even with the recent skid, I don't think you act impulsively when the team for the majority of the year has played with cohesion, and Callaghan's system is built on that total football kind of cohesion, that just bringing somebody in to bring them in, they're probably not going to integrate as quickly as they might in a club that relies so much on individual skill. So I think that's number 1. Number 2, they did make a couple of quote unquote moves. One was a move and one's a guy returning from injury. They bought the contract of Johnny Perez, who's on loan from LA Galaxy, and that took a pretty significant outlay. It's actually their first ever pure cash transfer, if I'm correct. It's not to the level of Cincinnati's with Evander, certainly, but Johnny Perez was just undeniable. He was a guy, part of 4 guys going for 2 wing spots, and he just kept on keeping himself on the team sheet. You couldn't do anything to pry that guy off of. And so they spent some resources there, and they're not adding talent, but they are adding him to the books, and that costs resources. And then Tyler Boyd is coming back, actually had his first action against Atlanta United for more than a year, and you hate that for him. Knee ligament stuff and maybe some setbacks in his return. And so with him coming back, I think that was the other piece of it. Look, Nashville says we're adding somebody kind of, but he's been in the system. He understands his role. He's been training with the team for a while. And so, and then the third part is the resources just weren't there probably to make the kind of splash they needed to anyway, with those other factors in mind. So I don't think it's a concern. I think the lack of movement was pretty predictable. And unlike most mid seasons when Nashville supporters were kind of clamoring for that magic number 9, they got that a couple times, and those number 9s never really hit. I think better to stick with the known quantities and stockpile as much game as you can for what's to come.
That's a good perspective of it. I mean, I think maybe we were a little overwhelmed by all of the deals that were made this summer. I think I recall Tom Bogart saying this is the most that MLS has spent on summer transfers in this window. So maybe seeing a team that's high in the table not making moves is sort of, I think, throwing people off a little bit.
Well, and I think too, I mean, they're ahead of their plan a little bit, and yet there is still a plan, right? And I think it would be easy for their eyes to get bigger than their stomachs and spend a lot of money on somebody to try to just get them over the hump. I think they feel like they're still very much on that hump right now. And I think bringing somebody in prematurely could actually maybe derail that plan versus kind of continuing the steady growth path they're on.
Do you see then, with these returns and with these existing pieces in place, who the third option will be if Mukhtar isn't able to score on Cincinnati like he hasn't been able to in the past? Surge still looking, I think, if I recall, his first goal against Cincinnati, but I can't quite remember. Is there a third option that you feel can really make a difference in this game?
In this game, I'm not really sure. I think I would gravitate quickly toward a Jacob Schaffelberg, but Canada just played as we're recording this yesterday against Wales, and I'm not sure whether he's gonna get in. Looking, and he actually did not start in that game, so that's a possibility. I think though when we talk about the third member of the attack, I think maybe until recently, it was a little nearsighted to say they needed third goal scorer because again, Mukhtar and Surridge, while they were creating some, were really a product of the creation around them. And so you didn't need that third person to throw the ball into the net. You had the two you needed. You just had the versatile buildup beneath that. And you had more versatility when it came to things like assists and key passes and things like that. Until recently. And now Nashville goes to St. Louis. They struggle against Atlanta. And I think they are looking at needing, if not a third goal scorer, then a catalyst in the attack. And Schaffelberg has been that because he can take the lid off of a defense. He is that Hail Mary threat that then opens up the slot receivers to catch passes, to go to a football analogy. If he is able to play even 30 minutes there at the end, I think he's the perfect person to send in against a tired fullback and go chase a game or chase a win. If not for him, then I think you're looking at a workman-like type like Alex Muyl, who just refuses to go away. And 3 different managers now in Nashville have said, this guy's really good. He's just not getting the score sheet results. So I don't know that Nashville needs that third catalyst to score a goal, but I think if they can have a Schaffelberg taking the lid off the defense or Muyl working in those tight spaces, that could be ultimately very key. But also I think Nashville's actually better against good teams than they are against the bad ones. They have the Arsenal quandary, and I'm a big gooner, which is that they're good enough that the bad teams want to sit back and get into a shell, but they're not always good enough to break down those teams when they do it. And then they play in Orlando, they play a Philadelphia, even Cincinnati, who again beat Nashville fair and square earlier in the year, but it was a pretty attractive game, and they can hang because teams are open. And Nashville loves an open game. And so is this a 1-0 final in Cincinnati either way? Maybe, but I don't think so. I think this is more of a 2-1 or more because I think this thing is going to be open, and that favors what Nashville likes to do.
The podcast is also sponsored by Beyond Exercise. Beyond Exercise is a local physical therapy and fitness business that helps people stay active and injury-free. In fact, they help some of our local MLS Next Pro, and FCC Academy players with their health and performance needs. Check out their suite of services at gobeyondexercise.com. I'm going to bring to the stage sort of, I believe this was the setup of the last matchup against Atlanta, the 4-4-1-1, sort of something like that. You could envision it as a little bit more of a more fluid midfield to this. Is this something that you would see if Schaffelberg isn't available?
Yeah, I think so. I think the general shape this year for most of the year has been a 4-2-2-2 is what the club has classified it as. So your standard back line, then Yazbek and Brugman there as their central mids, as your kind of dual sixes, or Tagseth coming in. Tagseth and Yazbek has been the most used combination there in central midfield, but Brugman, again, can pick the heck out of a pass. And then, yeah, Schaffelberg and Muyl on the flanks there, but you also have Ahmed Qasim you can go to if Schaffelberg's not available, or Johnny Perez who can play on either side. So I don't think that this shape is really impacted by the presence of a Schaffelberg or his absence, but the approach within that shape certainly is, where Qasim is not going to beat you over the top, but he'll sit there and absolutely eat your lunch and pick your pocket in a 1v1 situation. Perez is a little bit of both. He's kind of a burner, but he's a striver at the same time. He's not as fast as Schaffelberg, but he's quick and he's clever. And Alex Muyl is your workman-like guy who's, he loves playing in a phone booth. So I think that the shape looks a lot like this. You just kind of pop Schaffelberg and Muyl a little bit higher and put Mukhtar kind of as a second striker beneath Surridge. And that's about how this should look for Nashville, regardless of the specific personnel they employ.
All right. Well, let's also make some predictions and maybe even talk about, I guess, our side as well a little bit more with this. Is there anybody on FC Cincinnati whose name doesn't start with E and end in Vander that you sort of have concerns going into this?
I got to say Ryan Anuga, don't I? I
You could say
mean,
that, absolutely.
half kidding, but I will say this: when he goes into the Central Defensive Midfielder Hall of Fame, we'll have to see which colors he chooses to wear. No, I think what's so interesting about Cincinnati to me is a guy like Denke producing right alongside Evander. Evander gets the headlines, but Denke, I mean, I know the outlay. He was a headliner too, certainly. And Orejano as well in the buildup he's able to allow. I think that's going to be really interesting to see when you have two teams essentially with dominant attacking duos. How that plays out defensively, which team plays higher in that line of confrontation and tries to be aggressive and repress versus who wants to sit back and be a little more conservative, in the defense. And you'd lean toward Nashville, I think, playing the game that it's played a lot against teams that are, and I view Cincy as superior, but at least equal. And that is to not be afraid to set those midfield traps and to sit back just a little bit more versus being so assertive and aggressive. And it's a team that can dominate possession when they want to or play that kind of game. And so I would think, it's really interesting to see how they can effectively sit back, set traps, play smart, but also play aggressively against that duo of Evander and Denke. I'm really interested to see how that unfolds.
We'll see how available Denke is. He is coming back from Togo after all.
That's a good point. That's
so
tricky.
he might be in sort of the Schaffelberg, bunch here in terms of how available will he be? How many minutes will he have? I don't think he played that much, if at all, in this qualifier.
18 minutes against Sudan, I think, right? So
yeah, that Togo's already been eliminated from World Cup competitions next year. So I don't think there was pressure to really bring him in late, if anything at all. He could come back. He probably will give you at least, I'd say 30, maybe even 45 if you bring him in a half. I am concerned about Nashville wanting to sit back and spring traps. Sometimes I feel Cincinnati has the capacity to do that. I think lately they haven't been good in terms of the press. They've been sort of floundering, and Miazga gave up that goal, I believe, against. Geez, it's been 2 weeks. I've already forgotten. Was it Philadelphia?
Yeah, it's Philadelphia. Yeah,
giving up that goal to Philadelphia just by trying to spring it up the middle and getting picked off easily. If Nashville sits back and tries to spring a trap, that's where I think Cincinnati can try to get around and beat it. That if they decide to press, I think that's where Cincinnati is going to stumble a little bit more.
I'm really interested to see how that plays out, because again, Nashville's best against teams that open up and expose themselves, but the defense is still not well drilled enough, especially when you have a guy like Nahar who's just always so earnestly trying to get forward down that flank. And then I think a huge question for me is Dan Lovitz good to go for at least 60 minutes? And I think signs point to yes. He came in late 2 weeks ago when Nashville's lost to Atlanta, but his absence has been, I think, the single biggest factor in Nashville's recent skid. Because the backup left back, Taylor Washington, who played way back against Cincy in USL as a starter, has been hurt, extended injury. And so they played Josh Bauer out of position there. And we love Josh Bauer in Nashville as a center back or a right back, but at left back, he doesn't offer as much going forward at all, and he's gotten exposed a few times. If Lovitz can play on that left flank and give you the stability on that side of the pitch, he can rotate in and be a third center back and let Nahar get high up the pitch on counterattacks. And that's Nashville's most dangerous equation, I think, in the back, and sets Nashville up then to play that kind of pressing game when you have Nahar who can help you set those traps and force those Cincinnati mistakes. So I'll be incredibly interested to see the lineup selection here, the injury situation, and also the approach that BJ Callaghan wants to use against, again, a Cincinnati team that if you do press them, they can very easily expose you with the quality they have in the attack.
I think you're also going to find a Cincinnati team that's definitely stocked up on their bench. I have heard question marks in terms of where's Matt Miazga. We haven't seen him in training the past 2 days. Hopefully it's just something where there's been something more pressing that he had to attend to. But for now, it looks like Miles Robinson is going to be back. Yakubo might play a few minutes. We're still waiting for Obi Nwomado to come back at some capacity. Other than that, though, I think you're going to have a lot of the team ready. and hopefully the likes of Brenner, the likes of Marksuk, the likes of even Samuel Gidi, ready to play extended minutes off the bench. So let's put it on the plate here. What do you see as a result here?
First of all, can we
Yeah.
put some Skyline chili on the plate? I love it. I know it gets maligned. I love it.
Okay.
So good.
One thing I would suggest, if you do come up to Cincinnati, look at all the other chili parlors. I mean, Pleasant Ridge Chili, Blue Ash.
Big fan of Blue Ash. Been to Blue Ash. It's great.
So definitely, open up your horizons here. But what do you see a result being in this game?
If we must talk soccer instead of chili, I think I see maybe a 2 or a 3-1 Cincinnati here. And I could easily flip it and say 2-1 Nashville as well. But I think the home, the nature of this being at home for Cincinnati probably makes me lean that way. But I think we see a relatively, open game. I think we probably see an early goal from somebody. I don't know which team will score it. But I think Nashville's going to want to come out with fresh legs after a couple weeks off and make a statement. They have had several guys on international duty who again, like a Schaffelberg may be impacted or a Har. But I think if they are fresh enough to really bring a lively type of game, an aggressive mid-block press and counter, they're either going to get burned or they're going to burn Cincinnati within 20-25 minutes. And then the game turns into, I think, probably a bit of an end-to-end track meet where there will be plenty of chances, and it's just who finds the finishing touch. So I'll lean towards Cincinnati being the home team. I'll say 2-1 FCC, but a coup de grace late by whoever's ahead to make it 3-1 wouldn't be surprising. What about you?
That's a tough thing because I don't think we're really known for our victory cigars here in town. Cincinnati tends to get ahead and get that 2-0 lead, the most dangerous lead in soccer.
Yep.
And then just, suck it up, withstand the slings and arrows from their opponent who are pressing to get anything. They'll give up a late goal if possible. And so I think I sort of see it going that way. I see 2 goals coming from the Cincinnati side. Not sure if they're bunched in the first half or spread over the game, but then I see a late Nashville score. I'll say 2-1 as well. And I think the win for Cincinnati is probably not going to be as, I think, beneficial to them, except maybe just keeping that home, first round home tilt.
Yeah.
And even then, with the way that they play on the road, maybe that's not even something they have to worry about.
I was going to ask you if Supporter Shield is still a realistic aspiration in Cincinnati. The 2 extra points that Cincy has on Nashville can be significant. But I think in Nashville, the thought is 5 matches left, 7 points out of Supporter Shield, get that home playoff spot, and that's a perfectly fine regular season. Is that where Cincinnati is at too? And is it more about just getting into peak form for the postseason? Obviously, if you can have your cake and eat it too, you're going to. But is that seen as a realistic objective at this point, or is it just kind of clean up the season, keep that second spot, and position yourselves well for the playoffs?
It's tough because last season, they were way out of it. They didn't have any aspirations late in the season. So the role was to clean up and play your best games down the stretch without, straying too far from what brought you there. But they were also hamstrung. They didn't have a lot of the players that they needed to. Matt Miazga and Nick Haglund were gone. And so you were depending on an inexperienced back line and Miles Robinson. So this time around, it's still in, I think, target range, but you have so many teams behind them that have games in hand that can probably win them. And not to mention you have 4 teams out of the last 5 that are still in contention. I'm throwing the Galaxy in there. The Galaxy probably don't have postseason, but they still are going to play like they want postseason. So these are going to be difficult games. I think you just take it one game at a time to, unfortunately use an overused trope and do what you can. Try to get second, try to get third, try not to fall too far down so that the likes of Orlando and Nashville again, or even a hot Miami squad down the stretch. So you're not going to their location and facing them off in 2 out of 3 games.
It'll be really interesting to see how this unfolds because I'm not overwhelmed by Philadelphia. Maybe it's because I cover a team that's beaten them twice, but it's a good team. But this could be one of those years where it doesn't really matter where you get in as long as you get in. Ideally, you get the home games. and a 4 seed, a 5 seed, a 6 seed could end up winning this thing. I mean, it's just that weird at the top right now of the Eastern Conference.
I mean, let's not forget that last year before the lower seeds just ate lunch, in the playoffs. So we'll see. I think the teams that are 1 through 4 are probably in a little bit of trouble when they look at 5 through 7.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see that when we get to it. Let's wrap up the show here, and definitely thank you for your 30 plus minutes with us. It's always great to have you on the show. Talk about chili, tire rubber, anything that you want.
The very Ohio show: football, chili, and tire rubber. That's like the big 3, right?
That's
like Buckeye candy while we're at it. I don't know.
Yeah.
We're missing here.
Yeah, I mean, as long as we're not talking about all the things coming from the capital city of Ohio, then I think we'll be fine.
That's fair.
But where can we find you guys on the World Wide Web and social media when we want to check out more of your work?
We would love to have you listen to the Club and Country podcast. We try, of course, to focus not just on Nashville SC, but also on the Eastern Conference in general. So the podcast handle, managed by my partner and proprietor of Club and Country, Tim Sullivan, is at Club Country USA. I am still on Twitter /X occasionally, mostly on football Saturdays. At West Boling TN is my handle. You can also follow me on Blue Sky and just search my name there. I don't even know what my handle is, but I'm there, and I'm there a little happier and a little more often these days than I am on X. It's just West Boling on Blue Sky as well. So we'd love for you to give us a follow, but also to listen to the podcast itself, Club and Country. I just have a feeling, Jeff, this isn't the last time these teams are going to be playing this year. And so I think we need to stay up on each other's teams. I think I would love to have your listeners tune in. We are longtime friends of CST for sure. So
I look at flashbacks to 2018, and every game against our two teams was a draw. You could even say that the playoff game was a draw. So I don't see this weekend happening that way. But if it does draw, I'll be like, you know what? That is a good flashback to have in your 10th year of existence.
Gosh, 10 years. That's crazy. How's it been that long? That's amazing.
Yeah, it feels like there's the disjoint in the middle, but we know about that.
Yeah, we don't talk about it.
So if we're talking about connections, if you guys want to stay connected to our show, make sure you go to CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com. Check us out on X at Cincy Soccer Talk. We're on Blue Sky as well. That's our address there. We have Instagram as well. Look for the same name. You can go and also your favorite podcast platform. We got the main show on Mondays. We've got this show that comes out mid to late week. Every week. I do my best to update with that. But yeah, let's close it out. And thank you very much for your time listening. Everybody listening, thank you for your time. Wes, thank you for your time joining me. And I say this to all my guests, keep your kit clean. Let's have a nice 90 minutes. Thank you.